Many people assume openness is open. People say they have open mind, meaning less resistance to the new ideas. People say they have open hearts to allow certain feelings to flow through the heart. But what is really the openness? The entrance to the real openness is recognition and clear seeing of the boundary of the mind, of the boundary of the heart, of the boundary of energy, sensations, recognition and clear seeing of the boundary of your presence, your I am, recognition and clear seeing of any boundaries of your attention and focus, or even your awareness, if there are any boundaries. So to see the real openness is to see the boundaries at first. And by seeing the boundary, you automatically become aware of the larger openness. You become aware that there is something more. The openness of consciousness itself, or the self, it has no boundaries. Even if within the experience arises a certain energy sensation, which has a definition, its form and shape, its qualities. In the consciousness itself, the experience is seen as the experience within myself, or my consciousness itself. So within myself is the experience, and therefore the experience is not limiting myself. In the classical example of the movie theater screen, the white screen, and the cinema screen, the white screen recognizes, it becomes self-aware that its true nature is the white screen and not the images appearing on myself on this white screen. So therefore, whatever arises, whatever sensations, experiences appear, come and go and disappear, the white screen, being self-realized or self-aware, can never really mistaken itself from anything else that would appear. So this openness at the highest level cannot mistaken itself for any boundary, any limitation. Even if the limitation is within the experience, for example, the body has obviously its shape and form and its own limits, in what the body can do. And the same thing applies to any emotion, any thought, and any energy. They all have their certain qualities and limitations inbuilt in themselves. So the aware, self-aware consciousness fully acknowledges the limitations of the body, of emotions, thoughts, or energies, feelings, sensations. And there's nothing wrong that the body is as such. There is nothing wrong that emotion is as such. There's nothing wrong with sadness. It's quite beautiful in itself. The identity with sadness creates a distortion, and therefore it creates that friction or resistance. And that's where the suffering or discomfort arises because of the friction with, for example, sadness. But the pure sadness, it's a beautiful energy, it's a beautiful emotion. It has its texture and form and shape. Imagine if you are in a laboratory and you are inventing new emotions as a scientist, and you say, oh, sadness, we're gonna give these qualities to this new emotion that we will share with sentient beings. And then you say joy. It's also another beautiful emotion. It has its own colors and shapes and forms. And we will share that emotion with all the sentient beings. And in the laboratory, as a scientist, you can invent so many emotions that the sentient beings can experience. And if the situation is challenging or difficult or not according to one's expectation, a sentient being becomes sad because something happened not in favor of the relative experience. And then you say, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to share sadness. It's a beautiful experience to be shared, appropriate to these specific conditions or circumstances. So you see, there's nothing wrong in emotion itself. The identity creates a distortion, friction, resistance. And that's where the sadness becomes unwanted. But it's already here, but it's unwanted. And that's what creates the inner tension and consequentially the inner limitation. So what we experience as limitations, and this is important in the discussion of openness, to understand the nature of limitations, that it is nothing wrong within the limitations themselves. And by fully acknowledging the nature of limitations or boundaries, we can then realize that there is always openness. So this openness is always available. It is always available. It is always here. However, it is not always experienced. And I want you to have a clear distinction that the openness is always available. It's always here, but not always experienced, because the experience can be limiting the experience due to factors of resistance, avoidance, limitation, or your attention being absorbed into that particular kind of experience. But if you pause for a second, the experience and your assumption that you are this entity in this experience, if you pause just for a second and you recognize that this is an experience and it includes everything as it is, and you are aware of this experience, then you will recognize that this openness is always available and always present. Yeah, so that is the case. So of course, the goal is, how do we experience this openness? How do we experience the consciousness itself? And that's where different degrees are, different degrees on the journey to the full consciousness, how we experience the full consciousness. So the full consciousness is always here, available. It never went anywhere. It never went anywhere. Yeah. But in our experience, we feel that it was, for most of the people, it wasn't here. But that's not true. Yeah. It's like a person would become aware that what they're breathing, perhaps like if we roll back 500 years ago, a person would assume that what they're breathing, there is nothing. There's really nothing. You're just, it's just your nose and your lungs are doing something, but there's nothing coming in or out. But, 100 years ago or so, plus minus, scientists discovered that what we're breathing is called oxygen. And it has its qualities. It's always been here. It's just that before, a person didn't know that. So the same way, the natural consciousness is always here. And that's how we can get to know it, by looking closer, observing closer. And of course, the whole complication is, how do we make this experience more permanent? And how do we experience closer the openness of consciousness? So, what are the different opennesses? Yes. Of course, at the very, very lowest level, a person can make a lot of effort to open their mind to some new ideas. They really kind of crack their head to allow a new thought to come in. That's where the rigid mentality is held. And maybe, there is something to more than, what one knows. So that's at the very, very bottom level. When we're all familiar with open-mindedness, nothing to say more about it. But when we come to spirituality, people experience all sorts of opennesses. People experience in their heart that their heart is open. There is no more sadness, no more anger, no more pressure, and the heart is open. And that's sometimes it's called a breakthrough, or sometimes it happens with a heartbreak. You break your heart, but nothing really breaks in it. It's just something opens up. So a heartbreak is a beautiful thing, because you were holding something and then you broke it down, And then there's this vulnerable, naked openness. And for people who are emotionally immature, it's painful, it's difficult. But for those who are more emotionally mature and who, of course, meditate and work on their heart chakra or energy center, it's a way of opening the heart center. So this openness of the heart is really has to do with the heart center, with the chakra of the heart, the energy center of the heart. So now, if we understand that every human being has 7 major energy centers, these are possible opennesses within those 7 energy centers. So it can happen in the third eye, in the throat, in the crown, and in all other energy centers. You may experience an openness, and all of you have had certain experiences of openings, but these openings are ever continuous, because as soon as you open um, your energy center, you have this experience, and then other kind of energy flows in, and therefore it becomes full again. Yeah. So the nature of um, what happens most commonly is that we have these openings, and then soon after we get filled up again with all sorts of energies. First we may feel some love and this and that, and then love starts to slowly dissipate, and then we start longing for love and missing for love, and we get filled up with other stuff. Yeah, so it's a constant flow. So within your energy system, you will not find the real openness, because the nature of the energy centers is to interact with energies. That's why they're called energy centers. They're not called openness centers or emptiness centers. They're called energy centers. They're vortexes of energy. So the vortexes of energy interact with, guess what? With energy. So that is their nature. Same thing with Kundalini energy. It's an energy flowing up the spine and through the nadis, and its nature is to interact with energies. So for all of those who are into energy work, you will experience openings, various kinds of openings, but the real openness is something more than that. It's beyond energy. So that's where we arrive to presence, and we experience space or emptiness, and it's quite synonymous, quite similar to the openness, but space also has various degrees, because space is something which is manifested, interestingly enough. And you say, but there's nothing in space, but space itself is a manifested thing which is expanding. Yeah, ask the scientists and they will say, yeah, there was a big bang and then it just expanded. So there is something in it. It is made of something. So the space is not empty, not truly empty. And so space can be a larger opening, but it's not the openness itself. Emptiness is a bit more correct way of looking at it, and that's where Buddhism comes in. And Buddha was very smart. He said, um, "My nature is Buddha, which means awakened, awakened to the emptiness, to the nature of emptiness." And then everybody's, how? What is it? And this and this, and he said, "It's not a content." So it was very, very good way of of um, of explaining to people at that time, so that people don't have a way to kind of identify with it or hold it or keep it or fill it up with anything in it, because the nature of emptiness is empty. So space and emptiness are different. Space is still something. And if we look at the universal structure, space is definitely something. It has a size. What's beyond the universe? The scientists are not there yet. They just discovered there might be other universes. But what's beyond the universe is, we could say, the ocean of the universes. So in my views and experiences, I popped out of the universe and I could see the ocean of universes. It's a very blissful light state in which you can see these bubbles or balls of the universes. And so that's a more open state. Yeah, it's a bigger openness or opening, but still not the last and final thing, because uh, even the opening beyond the universe is within the ocean of creation, of ocean in which the universes are bubbling up. And beyond that is coming, in a way, infinite degrees of further openings are possible, and the intensity of light can go into infinite degrees. And it surely does go into the infinite degrees. But the last and final openness is openness. It's just open. Yeah. And any experience, any degree of intensity of light is seen as an intensity or degree of light, or whatever else would be within it. So even if we, go into the sun and central sun and universal center, the energy gets more and more intense. So same thing going, into higher vibrational experiences at whichever level, and I will come, honestly to say that, you know, as a form, I can only experience a certain degree of the intensity of vibration, frequency, or light, because, for example, it is known that in the Ascension teachings, for example, like the central sun being, which is, or let's say our sun. Our sun is a being, and if our sun as a being would meet you in its essence, you would burn up instantly. Because you can't sustain that. None of your energy system is able to sustain the actual beingness of the sun itself. So the same way it goes for any other higher beings, as a central sun and galactic core and universal sun, and they have higher and higher intensities. So it goes to infinite level, infinite level. the intensity of vibration and frequency. But the openness, and this is what I learned many years ago, actually, quite at the early stages of my journey, um, where I was meeting uh, one of the gods of power, and this particular god has really cornered me in the astral plane, like put me right into the corner, and so I was witnessing it was a a beautiful lesson. So I was put it right into the corner, and he shows all the power that he has, and then something inside me says, but my awareness is free. And at that point, this god of power said, oh, now you learned the lesson. So no matter how powerful something is, there is the inherent freedom. So the size of your body or of your energetic vehicle, and it doesn't really matter. It's all relative, because in this lifetime we're wearing this small form, but maybe in past lifetime or next lifetime you will be a sun. Maybe you will be a galaxy. Maybe you will be something else, a newborn star, or a newborn, or a supernova. So there are different forms. But once you realize your inherent nature as openness, as this boundless awareness or consciousness, uh, then you realize the play of the cosmos. Yeah, that even the god of power, meets this young person and realizes that at the core they're the same, and it's just a different form. So form is form, and that's a beautiful lesson and a beautiful way of seeing it. That at the core we are the same. We are this one openness in which we simply experience different forms and shapes. So this is a beautiful way of getting to know the nature of openness. Yes, and essentially at um, full consciousness, in a more integrated state, you realize or you experience that you are this openness, and whatever is going on is experience. And even if the body feels tired or hungry, nothing wrong. There is absolutely nothing wrong to be tired or hungry or even upset. It depends on the level of integration and how polished one is. But many people who are newer to their opening, they can still experience all normal feelings and sadness and anger and all other feelings are still there, and there's nothing wrong with them. There was never anything wrong with them, because sadness is a common energy that flows around according to circumstances. So, but there's no more identity that supporting story and so on, to be lost in it, so to speak. So you can't, we could say, misidentify yourself, because even if you would for a moment you know be within the experience and kind of it may happen, you can get even lost a bit in your experience and identify for a moment, but you will soon wake up and come back and say, oh wow, this was an experience. So even relatively speaking, if one at full consciousness would still go through older cycles and still be, so to speak, visibly lost in emotion or whatever, they realize it was just an act, like an actor fully believed in the act, but they soon enough come back to know that, oh, of course I'm not this, and it just was a momentary act that happened. And there's nothing wrong with it. And then you clearly, soon enough, start to see that, yeah, there is maybe some pattern going on and something more to be healed. And also nothing wrong with that either. So openness, or full consciousness, that's where, all these words are the same at the end, is 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 that which one is beyond experience, and that which is totally okay with any experience. There's this deep acceptance and knowing that it's fine, and then the causes become evident and everything is okay. I like the saying that, um, you can listen very carefully, that considering all the circumstances, every experience is perfect as it is. Yeah, considering all the circumstances, known and unknown, every experience is perfect as it is. And of course, human mind is very, very limited, like really very limited. And so there are more unknown factors. So if one can truly accept this, that considering all known and unknown factors, every experience is perfect as it is. So really and truly, God or consciousness itself never ever made not a single mistake. But of course, it might be very hard to accept it. But yet again, that's why at first I said, considering all the circumstances, known and unknown, every experience is perfect as it is. Yeah, because there might be many factors involved, past lives, and all sorts of things that, even planetary karma, collective human karma, galactic, energies, all things known and unknown make this experience exactly as it is. And if you open up yourself to see more, perhaps starting with acceptance and then opening to all the unknown possibilities, you will surely arrive very soon to the same conclusion that every experience is perfect as it is, even if it's resisted or challenging or painful. You might just not know something right there. So this is the view of it, I saw a beautiful post one day. The healers are constantly healing. The light workers are constantly, working and fixing the light and battling with the darkness. The light warriors are constantly, fighting between light and darkness. The the enlightened people are trying to make others enlightened. The ascended masters are saying everything is absolutely perfect as it is. Yeah, so because the enlightened person will see all the problems, because they have this light, to see everything now clearly, and they see, oh wow, there's so many problems, you know. And of course you want to help people, you know, you want to try to help them out. And after some time, you know, after seeing more and more how things already are in the clear light of seeing, the enlightened person develops more and more acceptance, and more acceptance of all the known and unknown, to arrive at conclusion that everything is perfect as it is. And that's where there's this transcendence or ascension beyond a person, beyond the form, beyond the name and form and shape, into seeing of perfection of all as it is. And at the level of ascended masters, there's awareness of the universal laws and how everything was made or came to be. Of course, it's not um, absolutely complete, because there is not a single being in the whole universe who is absolutely, completely seeing, relatively speaking, everything. Yeah, because um, you know, an ascended master is a being who knows the laws, who can see the perfection of them. You know, a galactic entity, you know, a galaxy itself. And I had once an experience where I became the Milky Way galaxy, and I was really in the core of it, and it was so beautiful. It's like, wow, it's such a harmony, synchronicity. It's like imagine your body's in that spa and like in absolute perfection. So that's how the galaxy feels about itself. That is just like this, you know, total harmony, balance, and peace, like tremendous peace. Um, yeah, and then there are, you know, many other beings throughout the universe, but you know, every being has a limitation. So there is not no one as such who has a complete you know, awareness. Even the whole universe is a universal being. So we could say that the universal entity can be aware of all, but even that universal entity is also a form, a shape made of consciousness of something else. So therefore, um, this acceptance of known and unknown, and seeing the perfection how it's all made up is the way to go forward. Because any anger is lack of understanding, any judgment is rejection of knowledge, of acceptance, any fear is only due to unknown, and all these side effects are of a certain um, ignorance, as Buddha said, ignorance of how things are.